She stood in the middle of the glittering ballroom and realized she had become a ghost. The laughter around her was bright and careless. Jewels sparkled under the chandeliers. Couples moved through the steps of a waltz with practiced grace, their conversations rising in waves of pleasant noise. And there, in the center of it all, stood Helena Ashford, invisible to every eye that mattered. She had been the Duchess of Blackwood for exactly 1 year, 3 months, and 11 days. And in all that time, her husband had never once looked at her the way other men looked at their wives. Lord Ashford was speaking with a cluster of gentlemen near the far windows. His dark head was tilted slightly, listening. His posture was perfect, his expression unreadable. He was handsome in the way winter was beautiful, cold and distant and impossible to hold. Everyone respected him. Many feared him. No one truly knew him. Least of all his wife. Helena had spent the first months of their marriage trying to reach him. She had left flowers on his desk. She had learned his favorite tea and made certain it was always hot when he returned from the estate. She had stayed awake in the drawing room long past midnight, waiting for the sound of his boots in the corridor, only to watch him pass by with a brief nod, as if she were a servant he did not quite recognize. And still she had hoped, because there were moments, rare and fleeting, when she thought she saw something beneath the ice. A pause before he turned away, a flicker in his gray eyes when she laughed at one of his dry remarks. Once, during a thunderstorm, he had found her standing alone in the dark library, staring out at the rain. He had not spoken. He had simply placed a shawl around her shoulders and left. That shawl had been her most treasured possession for weeks. She had believed it meant something. She had been a fool. Tonight, she had worn a new gown, deep blue silk that matched her eyes. Her maid had arranged her dark hair with fresh white flowers. She had looked in the mirror and seen a woman who might, perhaps, be worthy of a second glance. She had walked into this ballroom with her heart beating too quickly, telling herself that tonight would be different. But the Duke had not looked at her. Not when she entered. Not when the master of ceremonies announced her name. Not when she stood alone near the refreshment table, watching the dancers swirl past, a fixed smile on her face. He had glanced in her direction once, his gaze passing over her as if she were a piece of furniture, and then returned to his conversation. That was when the last bit of hope inside her quietly died. She was 22 years old, married to a man who did not want her, trapped in a house full of silence and shadow. And the worst part was not the loneliness. It was the knowledge that she had chosen this. She had agreed to the marriage. She had believed with all her young and foolish heart that love could grow from duty. It could not. A burst of laughter came from a group of young ladies nearby. Helena did not need to turn to know they were looking at her. She had heard their whispers before. The Duchess of Blackwood, so plain, so quiet. The Duke married her for her father's land, you know. He never speaks of her. Have you noticed how he avoids her at every event? She had noticed. She felt a sudden, overwhelming need to escape. The walls of the ballroom seemed to press inward. The air was too warm, too heavy. She turned and walked toward the terrace doors, moving as quickly as she dared without drawing attention. The cool night air hit her face like a blessing. She stepped outside and did not stop until she reached the stone railing at the edge of the terrace. Below, the gardens of Lord Harrow's estate stretched out in moonlit silence. Roses and hedges and winding paths, all silver and shadow. Somewhere, a fountain was murmuring. The music from the ballroom floated after her, faint and far away. She gripped the cold stone and tried to breathe. She had become someone she did not recognize, a quiet, fatting version of herself. She had stopped painting, stopped writing, stopped playing the piano because every song reminded her of the days when her mother was still alive, when the house was full of warmth and noise. She had poured all of herself into being a duchess, and the castle had swallowed her whole. She did not hear the footsteps behind her. "Is the Duchess unwell?" The voice was low and calm, but it made her flinch. She knew that voice. She knew it in her bones. She turned, and there he was, her husband, standing in the doorway with his hands clasped behind his back. His face was half in shadow, but his eyes caught the moonlight, pale and watchful. "I am well," she said. Her own voice sounded strange to her, distant. "I only needed air." He stepped onto the terrace, letting the door swing shut behind him. For a moment they simply stood there, the space between them wide as a chasm. The music played on inside, muffled now, like a memory of a party she had never truly been part of. "You left quite suddenly," he said. "People noticed." Helena felt a laugh rise in her throat, bitter and brittle. She swallowed it down. "I did not think anyone would notice anything I did." Something flickered across his face, too fast to read. Then the mask was back, smooth as ever. "You are the Duchess of Blackwood. Everything you do is noticed." "Is that all I am?" The words came out before she could stop them. "A title to be observed." He went very still. The night air seemed to grow colder. Somewhere in the garden below, the fountain kept its endless, patient murmur. "I did not come to argue," he said quietly. "Then why did you come?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. For a long moment he said nothing at all. The silence stretched between them, thin and fragile. Then he stepped closer. She caught the faint scent of him, clean linen and cold air, and something beneath it, something warm and inexplicably painful. He stopped just out of reach, his gaze searching her face. "Because I saw you leave," he said, "and for a moment I could not find you." Helena's breath caught. It was such a small thing, such a simple sentence, but it cracked something open inside her. She had wanted him to see her leave. She had wanted him to notice. And now that he had, she did not know what to do with it. But before she could answer, the terrace door opened again, and a woman's voice broke through the moment like cold water. "Your Grace, there you are." Helena turned. Lady Penelope March was standing in the doorway, golden-haired and smiling, her emerald gown shimmering in the candlelight from inside. She was the daughter of a baron, famously beautiful, famously charming, and entirely too familiar with the Duke. "Forgive the interruption," Lady Penelope said, looking from Helena to the Duke with polite concern. "But Lord Harrow is asking for you. Something about the new drainage project in the East Fields." She smiled, as if sharing a private joke. "I told him you would never discuss agriculture at a ball, but he insisted you would want to know." The Duke's expression shifted. The brief softness Helena had glimpsed vanished, replaced by cool efficiency. He straightened and the distance returned, wider than ever. "I will be there shortly," he said. Lady Penelope lingered in the doorway, her gaze flicking to Helena with something that might have been sympathy or might have been satisfaction. "Shall I wait for you?" "No." The word was clipped, final. Lady Penelope's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, then returned. She dipped a quick curtsy and disappeared back into the ballroom, leaving the door slightly ajar. The Duke turned back to Helena. For a moment she thought he might say something more, something real, but then he simply bowed his head. "Go inside soon," he said. "The night air is not good for you." He walked away before she could respond. She watched him go, watched the door close behind him, watched the light from the ballroom cut off until she was alone in the dark. And for the second time that night, Helena realized she had been waiting for something that would never come. She did not go back inside. She stood at the railing until the music stopped, until the carriages began to roll away, until the stars blurred above her. Then slowly, she walked down the garden steps and into the night, not knowing where she was going, only that she could not spend one more moment in that room. She needed air. She needed space. She needed to remember who she was before Blackwood Castle swallowed the last of her. The garden was different at night, quieter. The paths were silvered with moonlight, the flowers dark shapes bowing under the weight of dew. Helena wandered without purpose, her slippers sinking into the soft grass. The cold crept through her thin gown, but she did not care. She was thinking about her mother. Her mother had been the center of everything once, laughter and warmth and the smell of fresh bread. She had died when Helena was 15, and the world had gone dim. Her father, a practical man with no gift for comfort, had retreated into his ledgers and his land. Helena had learned to be quiet, to be useful, to ask for nothing. So when the Duke's proposal had come, she had said yes, not because she loved him, she had never met him, but because it was her duty, because her father's estate bordered his, and the marriage would bring stability to both, because she had told herself that a quiet life with a quiet man was better than no life at all. She had been wrong. She had been so wrong. A twig snapped somewhere to her left. Helena froze, her heart lurching. She turned toward the sound, scanning the shadows. For a long moment she saw nothing. Then a figure stepped out from behind a tall hedge, and she forgot how to breathe. "I was told," said the stranger, "that the Duchess had retired for the evening. Yet here you are, wandering the garden alone." He was young, perhaps a few years older than she, with unruly dark hair and a coat that had clearly been expensive once, but was now rumpled and slightly too tight. His eyes were warm brown, and there was a smile on his face that held no mockery, only curiosity. Helena drew herself up, summoning the dignity her husband had been teaching her, whether he knew it or not. "I might say the same of you, sir. I do not believe we have been introduced." The stranger laughed, a low, easy sound. "No, I imagine not. I am not the sort of man who gets introduced to duchesses." He swept into a theatrical bow, one hand over his heart. "Theodore Grant at your service. Formerly of the Royal Navy, currently of no particular occupation, and always in the wrong place at the wrong time." Helena could not help the small smile that tugged at her lips. It felt strange on her face, like using a muscle she had forgotten. "I am. I know who you are." He straightened, his smile fading into something softer. "Everyone knows who you are, the Duchess of Blackwood, the woman who married the Ice Duke." "Ice Duke? That is what they call him," Theodore shrugged. "He is not known for his warmth. I apologize if that is too forward. I have been told I am often too forward." Helena shook her head. "No, you are honest. It is refreshing." He raised an eyebrow, a dangerous thing to say to a stranger. "Perhaps." She looked away, toward the distant lights of the manor house. "But I am tired of people who are not honest." Theodore followed her gaze. "The ballroom is full of them, is it not? That is why I left. That, and Lady Harrow's insistence on serving those terrible little fish things. I could not stand another moment of pretending to enjoy them." Helena laughed. It was a small sound, but real. It surprised her. "They are terrible, aren't they?" "An abomination. I am convinced the cook is at war with the guests." He grinned at her, and something in his face was so open, so unguarded, that she felt herself relax for the first time in months. They stood there in the moonlit garden, two strangers, and talked. About nothing, really. The terrible fish, the absurdity of balls, the way the stars looked over the sea. Theodore had a gift for making the world feel lighter, as if nothing mattered very much and everything was worth laughing at. For those few minutes, Helena forgot to be lonely. Then a new voice cut through the night, sharp as a blade. "Helena!" She spun. The Duke was standing at the edge of the path, his face like stone. He had removed his coat, and his white shirt was faintly luminous in the moonlight. The gardens lay in shadow around him, but there was no mistaking the tension in his shoulders. "Theodore," she said quickly, "this is my husband, the Duke of Blackwood." Theodore straightened, his easy manner replaced by something more guarded. "Your Grace." The Duke did not acknowledge him. His eyes were fixed on Helena, and there was something in them she had never seen before. Not coldness, something else, something burning. "The carriages are leaving," he said. "We are returning home." The words were clipped, barely controlled. Helena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. She opened her mouth to explain, but the Duke had already turned. He did not wait to see if she followed. He simply walked away, his footsteps echoing in the still garden. Theodore let out a low breath. Well, I see what they mean about the Ice Duke. Helena could not answer. She was watching her husband walk away from her again, and the cold inside her was spreading. She hurried after him. The carriage ride home was silent. The Duke sat across from her, staring out the window at the darkened countryside, his jaw tight. Helena sat with her hands folded in her lap, trying to think of something to say. But every word felt inadequate, and the weight of his silence pressed down on her. When they finally reached Blackwood Castle, he helped her down from the carriage without a word. His hand was cold beneath her fingertips, and he released her the moment her feet touched the ground. The great doors swung open. Servants appeared to take their cloaks. Everything was orderly, quiet, exactly as it always was. The castle loomed around them, stone and shadow, endless corridors stretching into darkness. Helena expected him to vanish into his study, as he always did. She was already bracing herself for the sound of his footsteps fading down the hall, but this time he did not move. He stood in the entryway, his back to her, his hands at his sides. The candlelight flickered over his face, catching the hard line of his jaw, the furrow of his brow. Who was that man? The question was low, almost inaudible, but Helena heard it. Theodore Grant, she said quietly. I had never met him before tonight. He came into the garden while I was taking air. The Duke turned. His eyes were dark, unreadable. And you spoke with him, alone in the dark. I did not seek him out. Helena heard her own voice rise, trembling with something between anger and hurt. I was not aware that speaking to another person was a crime. It is not a crime. He took a step toward her. But it is unwise. You are the Duchess of Blackwood. Do you know what people would say if they saw you in a garden at night with a man like him? A man like him, Helena's voice cracked. And what exactly is a man like him? Someone who speaks to me as if I am a person, not a piece of furniture. Someone who does not look through me as if I am invisible. The words hung in the air between them. The Duke stared at her, and for a moment she thought she saw something break in his expression. But it was gone before she could name it. You are not invisible, he said quietly. Then why do you never look at me? The question escaped before she could stop it. It was the question she had been asking herself for over a year, the question that had haunted every silent dinner, every empty bedroom, every night she had cried into her pillow. It was the question she had promised herself she would never ask. The Duke took a breath, his hands clenched at his sides. Helena. Never mind. She turned away, unable to bear it. Forget I said anything. I am tired. I am going to bed. She walked toward the staircase, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She expected him to let her go. He always let her go. But this time, his hand closed around her wrist. She stopped, frozen. His touch was warm, warmer than she had imagined, and his fingers were gentle despite the strength she could feel beneath them. She did not turn around. Helena, he said again, and there was something in his voice she had never heard before, something almost desperate. I do look at you. I look at you more than you know. She closed her eyes. Not the way I wanted you to. His grip loosened. She pulled her hand free and walked up the stairs, not looking back. She did not want him to see her cry. She had promised herself she would not cry over him anymore. She broke that promise before she reached her room. The next morning, Helena rose early. Her eyes were swollen and her head ached, but she forced herself to dress and go down to breakfast. She would not hide in her room. She would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her fall apart. But the dining room was empty. The Duke's chair sat untouched, his coffee growing cold. His Grace left for the North Estate this morning, the butler informed her, his voice carefully neutral. He said he would return within a fortnight. A fortnight, 14 days. He had not said goodbye. Helena sat alone at the long table, staring at the empty chair across from her, and felt something inside her shift. She had spent over a year waiting for him, hopping for crumbs of his attention. rearranging her life around his absence. She had made herself small, quiet, invisible. She had become a ghost in her own home. And for what? She set down her spoon with a trembling hand. Then she stood up, smoothing her skirt, and walked out of the dining room. She went to the library first. The room was vast and cold, full of leather-bound books and heavy furniture, and it smelled of dust and old paper. She had rarely spent time here. It had always felt like his space, not hers. But now she walked along the shelves, trailing her fingers over the spines, reading the titles. History, agriculture, law, the pursuits of a man who had no room in his life for softness. She stopped at a small shelf near the window. These books were different, thinner, brighter. She pulled one out, a novel, the kind her mother had loved. She opened it to the first page and found an inscription written in a delicate hand. To my dearest Alexander, on the occasion of his 10th birthday, may your imagination always be as wild as the seas in this story. Helena's breath caught. Alexander, the Duke's name. He had kept these books, hidden behind the heavy volumes of Duty and Land. She turned the page and a small piece of paper fluttered to the floor. She bent to pick it up. It was a letter, yellowed with age, the ink faded but still legible. Dear Alexander, it began. I am writing this because I cannot say it to your face. You are too young to understand, and I will be gone by the time you read it. But I need you to know that I did not leave because of you. I left because I had no choice. Your father's world was killing me piece by piece. The silence, the expectations, the endless cold rooms. I tried to be what he wanted. I tried so hard, but I could not breathe. Do not let him turn you into stone, my darling boy. Do not forget how to feel. I will love you always. Your mother. Helena's hands shook as she read the letter. She read it twice, then a third time. The words blurred and she realized she was crying, not for herself this time, for him, for the boy he had been, the boy who had found this letter and kept it, hidden in a book of adventure stories. His mother had left, his father had been cold, and Alexander had learned, somewhere in those lonely years, that love was dangerous. That feeling too much only led to pain. She understood now, at least a part of it. He was not made of ice. He was a man who had frozen himself to survive. But understanding did not make the loneliness hurt less. She put the letter back carefully, tucked it between the pages of the novel, and returned the book to its place. Then she wiped her eyes and left the library. She had a great deal to do. For the next week, Helena did something she had never done before. She lived as if he would not come back. She went riding every morning, exploring the ground she had only ever seen from windows. She met the tenants who worked the land, learned their names, listened to their concerns. She visited the village and sat with the children at the small schoolhouse, telling them stories her mother had told her. She played the piano in the music room, not the careful, perfect pieces she had been taught for company, but the old songs from her childhood, the ones that made her heart ache and sing. She wrote to her father. She wrote to an old friend from before her marriage, a woman she had neglected in her single-minded devotion to a husband who did not want her. She began to paint again, setting up an easel in the south tower, where the light was best in the afternoons. She did not think about the Duke. She did not wait for his letters. She did not stand at the window, hopping to see his horse on the road. Or at least she tried not to. But at night, when the castle was quiet and the moon rose over the hills, she could not help but think of the letter she had found, the boy who had kept it, the man who had become a stranger. And she wondered if there was any way back. The Duke returned on a gray morning, unannounced. Helena was in the south tower painting when she heard the sound of hooves on the drive below. She did not run to the window. She finished her brush stroke, set down her palette and walked slowly down the stairs. He was in the entryway when she reached it, still in his riding clothes, his boots dusty from the road. His hair was wind-tossed, and there was a weariness in his face that made him look younger somehow, more human. His eyes found her immediately. She saw them travel over her face, her hair, her paint-stained fingers. Something flickered in his gaze. Surprise, perhaps, or confusion. "Helena," he said. "Welcome home," she said quietly. "I will have the servants prepare a bath." She turned to go, but his voice stopped her. "You are painting." It was not a question. She looked back at him. "Yes." "I did not know you painted." She smiled, a small, sad thing. "There are many things you do not know about me." He flinched. It was barely visible, a tightening of his jaw, but she saw it. For the first time, she felt as if she had said something that reached him. But he did not respond. He simply nodded once and walked toward his study. The distance between them was still there, vast and silent, but something had changed. Helena could feel it. The ground beneath her feet was no longer as solid as it had been. The ice was beginning to crack. Whether that would lead to warmth or to drowning, she did not know. The days that followed were strange. The Duke was present in the castle, but he kept his distance. He spent long hours in his study or riding the estate. He did not seek her out, and she did not seek him. But she noticed things. She noticed that he had begun attending breakfast, not talking but sitting at the table with her, reading his correspondence while she read her novel. It was a small thing, but it was not nothing. She noticed that he asked the servants about her. Not directly, but she heard from her maid that his valet had inquired about her daily activities, where she went, who she spoke to. She noticed that his eyes followed her when he thought she was not looking. One evening she was in the music room playing an old folk song her mother had taught her. The melody was simple, the words even simpler. A song about a woman waiting for her love to return from the sea. It was sad and sweet and full of longing. When she finished, she heard a sound behind her. She turned. The Duke was standing in the doorway, his face half in shadow. He did not speak. He simply stood there, watching her with an expression she could not read. "Forgive me," she said, rising quickly. "I did not know you were listening." "Do not apologize." His voice was low, rough. "That was beautiful." The words fell between them like stones into still water. Helena did not know what to say. She had spent so long bracing herself for his indifference that she had no defense against his praise. "The servants say you have been visiting the village," he said, stepping into the room. "The children adore you." "The children are easy to adore." She sat back down at the piano, running her fingers over the keys without pressing them. "They do not care about titles or land. They only want stories." He moved closer, stopping near the window. The last light of evening caught his profile, sharp and elegant. "You have changed." She looked up at him. "I have stopped waiting." He went still. "Waiting for what?" "For you," she said it quietly, without rancor. "I spent over a year waiting for you to see me, but I cannot wait any longer. I have a life to live, even if it is not the life I imagined." He was silent for a long moment. Then he turned to face her fully, and she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "I see you," he said. "I have always seen you. I simply did not know how to tell you." "Then tell me now." He opened his mouth, then closed it. His hands clenched at his sides. For a moment he looked like a man drowning. "Helena," he said, and her name on his lips was a broken thing. "I do not know how." She stood, crossing the room to him. She stopped just out of reach, the same distance he had always kept. "Then learn." She left him standing there, alone in the fading light. The next morning, a letter arrived for her. The seal was unfamiliar, and the handwriting was bold and careless. She opened it at the breakfast table, aware of the Duke's eyes on her. "Dear Helena," the letter read, "forgive the familiarity, but I have decided that duchesses deserve friends too. I am returning to London next week, but before I go, I wondered if you might join me for a ride. I have discovered a path through the woods that leads to the most remarkable old ruins. I think you would enjoy them. Yours, Theodore Grant." Helena smiled before she could stop herself. It was so like Theodore to be entirely inappropriate and entirely charming at the same time. The Duke's voice cut through her thoughts. "Who is that from?" She looked up. His face was carefully blank, but there was a tension in his shoulders that had not been there a moment before. "Theodore Grant," she said lightly. "You remember him, the man from the garden. He has invited me to ride with him to see some ruins." The silence that followed was heavy enough to press against her skin. The Duke set down his knife with a sharp click. "I would prefer that you did not." Helena raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" "Because he is not suitable company for a duchess." "He is kind to me." She folded the letter and tucked it into her sleeve. "That makes him more suitable than most." The Duke's jaw tightened. "You do not know him." "No," she agreed. "But I would like to. He treats me as if I am interesting, as if my thoughts matter. Can you say the same?" She had not meant to be cruel, but the words came out sharp and she saw them land. The Duke's face drained of color, and for a moment he looked exactly like the boy who had written that letter to his mother. Lost. Alone. He stood abruptly. "Do as you wish," he said, his voice cold. "You will anyway." He walked out of the room, and the door closed behind him with a quiet finality that felt like a wound. Helena sat there for a long time, staring at the empty chair across from her. Then she rose, called for her horse, and went to meet Theodore. She was done waiting. The ride with Theodore was everything she had hoped it would be. He was funny, irreverent, full of stories about the Navy and the strange characters he had met. He did not treat her like a duchess. He treated her like a friend. And for a few hours she forgot about the cold castle and the colder man who waited there. But when they reached the ruins, an old abbey crumbling into the hillside, Theodore's easy manner faded. He helped her dismount, and they walked among the fallen stones in comfortable silence. "Can I ask you something?" he said finally. "Of course." He hesitated, something she had not seen him do before. "Why did you marry him?" Helena looked out over the valley, green and gold in the afternoon sun. "Duty," she said. "My father's land, family expectations, the usual reasons." "That is not a reason to marry someone." "No," she turned to him with a small smile. "It is not, but I did not know that then. I thought duty could be enough. I thought I could make it enough." "And now?" She shook her head. "I do not know what I think anymore." Theodore studied her for a long moment. Then he said very quietly, "He does not deserve you." Helena laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Perhaps not, but I chose him, and for better or worse he is my husband." "Do you love him?" The question hit her like a physical blow. She stared at Theodore, her heart pounding. She had never asked herself that question. She had been so focused on whether he loved her that she had not stopped to examine her own heart. She faltered, "I do not know." Theodore nodded slowly, as if he understood. "Then there is still time." "Time for what?" He smiled, but it was a sad smile. "To find out." They rode back in silence, the sun setting behind them. When they reached the castle gates, Theodore took her hand and pressed it briefly. "Thank you for today," he said. "I will be in London for the season. If you ever need a friend, you know where to find me." "Thank you, Theodore." He released her hand and rode away, and Helena watched him go with a strange ache in her chest. Not love, not longing, but something like gratitude and something like grief. The Duke was waiting for her in the entryway. He stood there still in his riding boots, his face like thunder. His eyes swept over her, taking in her wind-tangled hair, the flush in her cheeks, the faint smile that still lingered on her lips. "Did you enjoy your ride?" His voice was flat, controlled. "Yes," she said, meeting his gaze. "Very much." "Good." He turned and walked toward his study, but she saw the way his hands were trembling. That night Helena lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The castle was quiet around her, the way it always was, but she could not sleep. She kept thinking about Theodore's question. "Do you love him?" She thought about the way her heart had raced when the Duke stopped her in the library, the way his voice had sounded when he said her name, the way he had looked at her in the garden as if he were seeing her for the first time. She thought about the letter she had found, the boy who had been frozen by a cold father and an absent mother. She thought about the year of silence, the year of waiting, the year of feeling invisible. She did not know if she loved him, but she knew she was not ready to stop hopping. A sound broke through her thoughts, footsteps in the corridor, slow, halting as if someone was packing. She held her breath, listening. The footsteps stopped outside her door. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then she heard a voice, so quiet she almost missed it. Helena. She did not move, she did not breathe. The voice came again, rough with something like pain. I am sorry. Then the footsteps retreated down the hall, and she was alone again. She buried her face in her pillow and wept. The next morning the Duke was gone again. This time he had not ridden to the North Estate. He had gone to London. The servants did not know when he would return. Helena stood in the empty entryway, staring at the closed doors, and felt something inside her harden. She had spent so long waiting for him to stay, but he kept leaving. He kept running, and she could not spend her whole life chasing a man who did not want to be caught. She went to the South Tower and painted until her hands ached. She painted the ruins she had seen with Theodore. She painted the sea she had never crossed. She painted a woman standing at a window, looking out at a road that stretched into darkness. And then she made a decision. She would go to London, not to follow him, but to live, to be a part of the world she had hidden from, to stop being a ghost. If he did not want her, she would find a life without him. But first, she needed to survive the season. London was a whirl of noise and color and relentless social obligation. Helena arrived at the townhouse with her maid and 3 trunks, feeling small and uncertain. The city had not changed since her debut, but she had. She was no longer the shy girl who had hidden in corners, hopping not to be noticed. She had learned in the silence of Blackwood Castle how to stand alone. The invitations began arriving almost immediately. The Duchess of Blackwood was a curiosity. Some invitations were kind, others were merely curious. A few, she suspected, were sent in the hope of witnessing her humiliation. The Duke's absence was noted. The whispers followed her everywhere. She has come alone. He did not accompany her. What kind of marriage is that? Helena ignored them all. She attended balls and dinners and musical evenings with her head high. She danced with men who asked, laughed at their jokes, and declined their offers of more. She was not looking for a lover. She was looking for a place to belong. And then one evening she saw him. The Duke was standing near the fireplace at Lady Ashworth's ball, his dark head bent to listen to something Lady Penelope March was saying. The sight of them together, so close, so comfortable, sent a spike of pain through Helena's chest. She turned away before he could see her, but it was too late. Helena. She closed her eyes. His voice was the same, low and controlled, but there was an edge to it she had not heard before. She turned slowly. "Your Grace," she said, "what a surprise." His eyes swept over her. She was wearing a deep red gown, the color of ripe cherries, and her hair was piled high with pearls. She had chosen it deliberately. She wanted to look like a woman who did not need anyone. "You came," he said. "I did. Did you think I would not?" He seemed to struggle for words. "I did not expect." "No," she interrupted, her voice calm. "You never did expect me, did you? Not at Blackwood, not here." She smiled, and it felt like a blade. "But here I am. I hope you and Lady Penelope are having a pleasant evening." She turned and walked away, leaving him standing there. Her heart was pounding, but her steps were steady. She had never spoken to him like that before. It felt terrifying and liberating and exhausting all at once. She danced 3 dances with 3 different men, and she did not look back at the fireplace once. But she felt his eyes on her all night. The next weeks were a strange, bitter game. The Duke was everywhere she went. He did not approach her, but he was always there, watching from across the room, his presence a constant shadow. Lady Penelope was often beside him, her golden head tilted toward his, her smile sharp and knowing. Helena tried to ignore them. She spent her days visiting galleries and riding in the park. She renewed her friendship with Charlotte Dean, the friend she had neglected, and together they navigated the social maze of the season. She met interesting people, heard interesting stories, and slowly began to remember what it felt like to be herself. But the Duke's absence from their townhouse was a wound that would not heal. He did not come home at night. Or rather, he came home long after she had retired and left before she woke. She heard him sometimes, moving through the quiet house like a restless spirit. The servants whispered. She pretended not to hear. One afternoon, she returned from a walk to find a parcel waiting on her writing desk. It was wrapped in brown paper, no note. She opened it slowly, her breath caught in her throat. Inside was a small painting, a watercolor of the sea, wild and blue and endless. The brushwork was loose, almost careless but full of feeling. She stared at it for a long time, trying to understand. Then she noticed the initials in the corner, A.B. Alexander Blackwood. He had painted this for her. She sat down on the edge of her bed, the painting clutched to her chest, and cried. But she did not go to him. She could not yet. The first break came on a rainy afternoon. Helena was in the small parlor reading when the door burst open and the Duke walked in. He was soaking wet, his hair plastered to his forehead, his coat dark with rain. He stopped when he saw her, his chest heaving. "Helena," he said, "forgive me, I did not know you were here." She set down her book, her heart racing. Where else would I be? He shook his head, water droplets flying. I do not know anything anymore." He ran a hand through his hair, an oddly vulnerable gesture. "I have been writing all day. I could not think, I could not breathe." He looked at her and his eyes were wild. "I cannot stop thinking about you." She stared at him, stunned into silence. "I know I have no right," he continued, his voice breaking. "I know I have been cold and distant and cruel, but I cannot bear it. I cannot bear watching you from across a room, watching other men dance with you, seeing you smile at them. It is driving me mad." He took a step toward her, then stopped. "Tell me to leave. Tell me to go back to Blackwood and leave you in peace. I will do it. I will do anything you ask, but I had to tell you. I could not keep it inside any longer." Helena stood slowly. The room felt very quiet. The rain drummed against the windows, soft and steady. "You left me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You left me over and over. I waited for you. I would have given you everything, but you never looked at me." "I know," his voice was raw. "I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" He closed his eyes. "Of this, of feeling this, of losing myself the way my father lost himself, the way my mother—" He broke off, shaking his head. "I thought if I kept my distance I could protect myself, protect you, but I was wrong, I was so wrong." Helena moved toward him, her step slow and careful. She stopped just in front of him, so close she could feel the heat of his body, the dampness of his clothes. She could see the pulse beating in his throat, the tension in his jaw. "Alexander," she said. It was the first time she had called him by his name. He opened his eyes and looked at her, and there it was. The thing she had been searching for all those months, the thing she had thought she would never see. Love, raw and desperate and terrified. "Tell me what you want," she whispered. He swallowed hard. I want you. I have always wanted you. I was just too much of a coward to admit it." She reached up and touched his face, her fingers cold against his rain-chilled skin. He flinched, then leaned into her touch, his eyes closing again. "Then stop running," she said. "Stay." The word hung between them, a question and a promise. He opened his eyes and looked at her, and something in his face changed. The fear faded. The tension eased. He reached up and covered her hand with his own, pressing it to his cheek. "I will stay," he said, "as long as you will have me." She did not answer with words. She rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his, and the rain kept falling, and the world went quiet. When they finally pulled apart, they were both trembling. The Duke rested his forehead against hers, his breath ragged. "I thought I had lost you," he said. "I thought you had found someone else. That man, Grant, I saw the way he looked at you. I wanted to tear him apart." "Theodore is my friend," Helena said gently. "Nothing more." "I know." He pulled back slightly, meeting her eyes. "But it does not make it easier, the thought of you with anyone else. It makes me feel things I do not know how to control." "Then do not control them." She smiled, a real smile, the kind that reached her eyes. "Let yourself feel, Alexander. The world will not end." He laughed, a low, rusty sound that made her heart sing. "I have not laughed in years. You have undone me." "Good," she said. "It is time someone did." They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, while the rain washed the city clean. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Helena felt at peace. But the storm was not over yet. The next morning, Helena woke to find the other side of her bed empty. For a moment, the old panic returned. But then she heard the sound of movement in the next room, and the door opened, and there he was. Alexander, her husband, carrying a breakfast tray. He was still in his shirt sleeves, his hair rumpled, and there was an uncertainty in his eyes that made her want to laugh and cry at the same time. "I did not know what you liked," he said, setting the tray down on the bed, "so I brought everything." Helena looked at the tray. There was toast, jam, eggs, fruit, tea, coffee, and what appeared to be half a cake. She did laugh then, the sound bright and sudden. "This is absurd," she said. "I know." He sat on the edge of the bed, watching her with a small smile. "But I wanted to do something. I have spent so long doing nothing." She reached for the tea, her fingers brushing his. "You can start by joining me for breakfast every day." "Every day," he repeated, as if testing the words. "I would like that." They ate in comfortable silence, and Helena felt something blooming inside her, fragile and new. She was not foolish enough to believe that everything would be perfect now. The wounds of the past year would not heal overnight, but this was a beginning, and beginnings, she thought, were the bravest things there were. The weeks that followed were not easy. There were still moments of silence, still echoes of old hurts, but there were also new things. Morning rides together, evenings in the library reading side by side, long conversations that lasted past midnight. He told her about his mother, about the letter he had found, about the fear that had ruled him for so long. She told him about her own mother, about the years of loneliness, about the woman she had been before Blackwood. They learned each other slowly, like explorers mapping unfamiliar territory. And with each passing day, the distance between them grew smaller. But the season was not over, and the world was still watching. The gossip had shifted. No longer did people whisper about the Duke's coldness. Now they whispered about his transformation. He was seen at Helena's side, attentive and protective. He danced with her at balls, his hand resting possessively on her waist. He looked at her as if she were the only person in the room. Lady Penelope March did not take the change well. Helena saw it in the woman's eyes at a dinner party, the way her gaze followed Alexander with something like fury. She had spent months positioning herself as his confidant, his companion, perhaps his future. And now he had turned away from her, back to his wife. It was Lady Penelope who finally broke. They met in the powder room at a ball, alone. Helena was fixing her hair when the door opened and Lady Penelope entered. She was even more beautiful up close, her skin flawless, her eyes bright with anger. "Duchess," she said, her voice cold. "Lady Penelope." Helena turned to face her, keeping her voice steady. "You must be very proud of yourself." Lady Penelope's lips curved into a smile that did not reach her eyes. "He was mine, you know, before you came. We had an understanding." Helena's heart lurched, but she did not let it show. "Did you?" "He never mentioned it." "He would not." Lady Penelope moved closer, her skirts rustling. "Alexander does not talk about such things, but I knew him before you did. I knew the parts of him he keeps hidden. I was patient. I was waiting for the right moment." Her eyes narrowed. "And then you appeared. The perfect little sacrifice, married for land and convenience. I thought you would fade away. But you did not. You fought for him." "I did not fight for him," Helena said quietly. "I stopped fighting. That is when he came to me." Lady Penelope's face twisted. "Do not be naive. He came to you because he was afraid of losing what he owns. He does not love you. He does not know how to love. His mother saw that. She left him. And one day you will leave him too." The words struck deep, but Helena did not flinch. She had spent too long learning not to be broken by cruelty. "You are wrong," she said. "He does know how to love. He is learning, and I am not leaving him. Not ever." Lady Penelope laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "We shall see. At the end of the season, when he realizes what he has sacrificed to keep you, he will regret it, and then he will come back to me." She swept out of the room, leaving Helena standing alone, her heart pounding. But she did not cry. She did not fall apart. She straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and walked back into the ballroom. Alexander was waiting for her. His eyes found her across the room, and he moved toward her immediately, concern etched on his face. "What happened?" he asked, taking her hand. "You look pale." "Nothing." She forced a smile. "Just a conversation with an old friend." He did not believe her. She could see it. But he did not press. He simply held her hand, his thumb tracing slow circles on her skin. "Let me take you home," he said. She nodded, and they left the ball together, two figures moving through the glittering crowd, bound by something stronger than duty. That night they sat in the parlor of the townhouse, the fire crackling low. Helena was curled on the sofa, her head resting against Alexander's shoulder. The silence between them was easy, but there were words waiting to be spoken. "Lady Penelope said some things tonight," Helena said finally, "things I cannot forget." Alexander tensed. "What things?" She hesitated. "She said you had an understanding, that you were hers before I came." He was silent for a long moment, then he let out a slow breath. "There was never an understanding, not in the way she means. She was a friend at a time when I had no friends, but I did not love her. I did not want her." He turned to look at her, his eyes dark with intensity. "You must believe me, Helena. There has been no one, only you." Helena studied his face, searching for any trace of deception. She found none. "Why did you not tell me about her?" she asked. "Because I was ashamed." He looked away, his jaw tight. "She pursued me openly. It was a scandal waiting to happen. I should have ended it sooner, but I did not know how." He shook his head. "I was a coward in so many ways." She touched his face, turning him back to her. "You are not a coward now." He covered her hand with his own. "I am trying to be brave for you." They sat like that for a long time, the fire warming them, the city quiet outside. And when they finally went to bed, they went together. The season was drawing to a close, but the greatest challenge was still to come. A letter arrived one morning, bearing the Blackwood seal. Alexander read it at breakfast, his face growing darker with each line. "What is it?" Helena asked. He set the letter down, his hands unsteady. "My grandmother, the Dowager Duchess." He looked at her, and there was a weariness in his eyes she had not seen before. "She is coming to London. She wants to meet you." Helena's stomach clenched. She had heard stories of the Dowager Duchess, a formidable woman who had ruled Blackwood with an iron will. Alexander had spoken of her rarely, but always with a tension that suggested a difficult relationship. "When will she arrive?" she asked. "Within the week." Helena nodded, folding her hands in her lap. "Then we will prepare." The Dowager Duchess was everything Helena had feared and more. She arrived in a grand carriage, flanked by servants and trunks, and swept into the townhouse like a queen reclaiming her throne. She was small and sharp, with silver hair and pale eyes that seemed to see through everything. She looked Helena up and down, her expression unreadable. "So this is the girl." "I am the Duchess of Blackwood," Helena said, her voice steady. "I am pleased to meet you." The dowager's lips twitched. "Pleased? I doubt that." She moved past Helena into the house, her cane tapping against the floor. "Where is my grandson?" "He is at his club," Helena said. "He will return soon." "He should have been here to greet me." The dowager settled into a chair, her eyes scanning the room. "But then, he has always been thoughtless. You have learned that by now, I am sure." Helena did not respond. She had the sense that anything she said would be used against her. The dowager leaned back, studying her with an unsettling intensity. "I oppose this marriage, you know. Alexander married you for your father's land. There was no other reason. I told him he would regret it." The words were like stones, but Helena did not flinch. "He did not marry me for my father's land alone," she said quietly. "And even if he did, it does not matter now. We have built something more." The dowager's eyes narrowed. "Have you? Or have you simply convinced yourself of that because you cannot bear the alternative?" Helena opened her mouth to answer, but at that moment the door opened and Alexander walked in. He stopped when he saw his grandmother, his face going carefully blank. "Grandmother," he said. She smiled thinly. "Alexander, how good of you to finally arrive." He moved to Helena's side, his hand finding hers. "I see you have met my wife." "I have." The dowager's gaze flicked to their joined hands. "She is not what I expected." "She is more than anyone expected," Alexander said, his voice cool. "And I am fortunate to have her." The dowager's smile faded. "We have much to discuss, but first I am tired. I will retire to my room." She stood, her cane tapping. "We will speak tomorrow." She left, and the room seemed to exhale. Helena looked at Alexander. "She hates me." "No," he shook his head. "She hates everyone, but she does not know you yet. Give her time." "Time?" Helena laughed softly. "Time is all I have given, and it has never once made anyone love me." Alexander pulled her into his arms. "It made me," he whispered against her hair. "It made me." The days with the dowager were a trial. She criticized everything, from the running of the household to the arrangement of the flowers. She made pointed comments about the lack of an heir, the smallness of the London house, the company Helena kept. She spoke often of the past, of the proper way things should be done, of the duties of a duchess. Helena bore it all with a patience she had not known she possessed. She listened, she smiled, she made adjustments when necessary. She did not fight. But she did not break. And slowly, very slowly, she began to see cracks in the old woman's armor. One evening, the dowager was sitting alone in the parlor, staring at a small portrait she had brought with her. Helena entered quietly, not wanting to disturb her, but the dowager looked up, and for a moment her face was unguarded. "Come here, child," she said. Helena crossed the room and sat beside her. The portrait showed a young woman with dark hair and a gentle smile. She was beautiful, but there was a sadness in her eyes. "Who is she?" Helena asked. "My daughter." The dowager's voice was thick. "Alexander's mother. She was so full of life once, but this house, this family, it broke her." She looked at Helena and there were tears in her eyes. "I did not see it. I was too focused on duty, on appearances. By the time I understood, she was gone, and I have blamed myself every day since." Helena felt a lump form in her throat. "Alexander blames himself too. He thinks she left because of him." "Because of him?" The dowager shook her head. "No, she left because of me, because of his father, because of a world that would not let her be herself." She took Helena's hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "That is why I opposed this marriage. Not because I did not think you were suitable, but because I did not want another woman to be swallowed by this family." Helena's eyes filled with tears. "I did not know. I did not want you to." The dowager released her hand, her composure returning. "But I see now that I was wrong to interfere. Alexander is not his father, and you are not his mother. You have a strength she did not have." She paused. "I think you might save him." Helena could not speak. She simply sat there, holding the old woman's hand, letting the tears fall. And for the first time, she felt a glimmer of something she had never expected from the dowager. Approval. The season ended with a grand ball at the Blackwood townhouse. Helena stood at the top of the stairs, looking down at the crowd below, and felt a surge of pride. She had planned this evening herself, with the dowager's help. The house was filled with flowers and light, and the sound of laughter drifted up like music. Alexander came to stand beside her, his hand resting on the small of her back. "You have done something remarkable," he said. "You have brought this house back to life." She smiled up at him. "I had help from my grandmother." He raised an eyebrow. "I did not think the two of you would ever be allies." "Neither did I," Helena laughed softly. "But she is not so terrible once you earn her trust." "She scares the life out of me," he admitted. "She should. She is a formidable woman." They stood together, watching the dancers below. The dowager was holding court near the fireplace, surrounded by admirers. Theodore Grant was there too, dancing with Charlotte Dean, laughing at something she had said. Lady Penelope had left London 2 weeks earlier, retreating to the country with a new suitor. The scandal of her pursuit of Alexander had faded, replaced by newer gossip. "Are you happy?" Alexander asked quietly. Helena turned to him, seeing the uncertainty in his eyes. "I am," she said. "Are you?" He smiled, and it was the warmest smile she had ever seen on his face. "I am learning to be." She took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "Then let us keep learning together." He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it, right there in front of everyone. The gesture was simple, but it carried a weight of meaning that made Helena's heart swell. She had waited so long for this, for him, for a love that was not born of duty but of choice. And now, standing beside him, she knew the truth. She did love him, not the cold, distant man she had married, but the man beneath the ice, the boy who had kept his mother's letter, the husband who had learned too slowly to stay. She loved him, and she would spend the rest of her life showing him. They danced together that night, moving through the steps of a waltz as if they had done it 100 times before. The crowd parted around them, watching, whispering. But Helena did not care. She saw only Alexander, his gray eyes soft, his arms strong around her. "What are you thinking?" he asked. She smiled. "I am thinking that this is the beginning." "The beginning of what?" "Of everything." The music swelled, and he pulled her closer, and they spun through the candlelight like two people who had finally found their way home. The last note faded and they stood still, breathless, their foreheads touching. "I love you," he said. "I should have said it a long time ago, but I love you, Helena, I love you." She closed her eyes, letting the words wash over her. "I know," she whispered. "I love you too." And in the heart of the crowded ballroom, surrounded by light and music and the murmur of countless voices, they stood together, two people who had been broken and lost, now made whole. The ice had melted. The ghost had come alive. And the Duke of Blackwood, the man they had called cold, held his wife's hand and smiled. It was, she thought, the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. The days that followed were full of small joys. They stayed in London until the end of the season, then returned to Blackwood Castle. But the castle felt different now, warmer. The corridors were no longer empty. The rooms were no longer silent. There was laughter in the halls, music drifting from the piano, the sound of two pairs of footsteps walking together. Helena resumed her painting, and Alexander joined her in the South Tower, bringing his own watercolors. They worked side by side, not speaking, content in each other's company. The servants whispered about the change in the Duke, the way he smiled, the way he looked at his wife. The tenants noticed it too. The estate flourished under their joint care, and the village children began to call the Duchess by her first name. The dowager visited often, bringing gifts and advice in equal measure. She had softened, though she would never admit it. She and Helena spent long hours in the garden, talking about everything and nothing, and the old woman's laughter became a familiar sound. 1 year later, a child was born. A girl with her mother's dark hair and her father's gray eyes. They named her Clara after Helena's mother, and the castle rang with the sound of her cries. Alexander was a devoted father, though he would never have expected it. He held his daughter for hours, singing to her in a low, tuneless voice, and Helena would watch them from the doorway, her heart so full it ached. "She has your stubbornness," he said one night as Clara refused to sleep. Helena laughed. "That is your stubbornness, not mine." He smiled, rocking the baby gently. "Then we are both doomed." They stood together, looking down at the small miracle in his arms, and Helena felt a peace she had never known. She had come to this castle a ghost, invisible and unloved, but she had fought her way back to life. She had learned to stand alone, and in doing so, she had found someone to stand beside her. The Duke of Blackwood had once been a man of ice. Now he was a man of warmth. And the Duchess, the woman who had waited so long for love, had finally found it. Not in the grand gestures or the public declarations, but in the quiet moments, in the small kindnesses, in the slow, steady beating of two hearts learning to be whole. She was no longer a ghost. She was home, and she was loved.